Okay, Sue. Thanks for talking to me today.
I'm so excited to be with you, Hannah.
I really want to just dive into your career, and you're a behavioral consultant. Oh, what's your backstory?
I have a really nice, I think, kind of cool, just by chance, this is what I got into story of how this all came about. And so I've been in the work that I do, which is behavioral health for individuals that are on the autism spectrum. And when I was in college, I answered an ad in my college paper for a family that was looking for someone to do play therapy with their child. And so I thought, I don't know about this, but you know what? I know I like psychology, and I pretty much tried every other type of psychology that was out there, and none of it quite like did it for me, I guess. So it was interesting. And then what I found was that I would lose interest pretty quickly. And so when I met the first little boy that I started doing therapy with from the school paper ad, I met him and instantly connected with this little boy. He was 3 years old and he wasn't talking. And I just got on the floor with him and tried to interact with him. And he didn't really make eye contact or play or speak or anything, but I just instantly was drawn to this little boy. And so the family said, looks like you do pretty well with children, and come back in another week and we'll do all of your training for you. And that's how it started. So I started working with one little boy for a year, and then his other brother was diagnosed a year later. So I ended up working with both of their brothers. I was still an undergrad in college too at the time. And so when you get a degree in psychology, you usually cannot get a job right away working with people doing what you studied. And so I was really, really lucky that I landed this position by doing therapy with these two little brothers. Eventually, in where I live, other children started doing services in behavioral health too. And I was kind of torn, and I thought, do I want to keep doing this? I knew I loved working with people with autism, because the piece that I really loved about it then and still now is that every single day is a new learning experience. And I'm very much a person that's curious and wants to try to figure things out and try things new. And so this, I think, is what's drawn me to what I do now, today still. But another little boy was being treated, and the mom interviewed me. She took me to a video store to meet me and her son. And she looked at me and she said, we're just talking. And she says, well, in a second, we're going to leave the store. She didn't tell me how her son was going to react, but she told her son that we were leaving, and he threw himself on the ground because he wanted to play a particular game that he wasn't able to play with. And I looked over my shoulder and I said, okay. So I scooped him up and I carried him out of the store, and the mom says, you're hired. So that's how I got my next job with autism. That's how I started working with him. And it was just this thing though, where I think always have had this, again, curiosity about learning new things, trying different things. And each child that I've worked with, the wonderful thing is it's learning over and over again, something new. And I think that's what's continued to draw me to this work. So eventually, though, I'm explaining this in a really long way. Eventually, after working with several children, I was approached to see if I wanted to start training teams of therapists that would work with children then. And so I got trained to do the work of a supervisor or consultant then, and started then training other families and therapists to work with their children that have autism. And so for a period of time, I traveled around the world, helping design programs and train teams all around the world. I went to 5 different continents designing programs for individuals that had autism. And now what I primarily do is I work from home now most of the time, and do most of my work over video. And I teach other behavior analysts and clinicians and parents and other professionals how to work with individuals that are on the spectrum. So that's what I do now. But my job has evolved pretty significantly over the years. I went from doing day-to-day therapy every day. I mean, I got to play with toys every single day at work for a really long time, which was super cool, because I'd say that I'm probably a kid at heart. And then was eventually told that I could help more children if I stopped doing the day-to-day therapy and started doing the consulting. And then after that, I was asked to stop seeing children and then train clinicians. So now I train other clinicians to provide behavioral health services for children and families with autism.
Nice that you've had experience in all the stages. For someone who maybe doesn't have a family member who has autism or is familiar with autism, what is it like? What's kind of your day-to-day?
So for a behavior technician, that's what they call individuals that provide the one-to-one therapy, they would typically receive like lecture training and some like a written test, and then also hands-on time, because we want to make sure that you know the technical information, but then you're also able to interact and play and teach someone that's on the spectrum. And so you could be doing anything from learning how to play with cars all the way up to, if you're working with an adult, teaching them how to date or go grocery shopping or fill out a job application or have an interview or drive a car. So depending on what your person needs, you get trained on how to teach any one of those skills that your learner would need.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the spectrum a little bit. It is a spectrum. Some nonverbal, verbal, different skill sets. For someone who's not familiar with autism, what is that like from your experience? And tell me a little bit about autism and what that's like day in and day out for someone who has it.
Sure. So generally speaking, when we're looking at someone that has a diagnosis of autism, it's characterized by excesses and deficits. So particularly in the area of excesses, it may be things like repetitive or ritualistic behavior, like compulsive behavior on the excess side. When we talk about deficits, it's often related to communication, for example. And so if you look at maybe why an excess might exist, it's likely because there's a deficit that's also there. So for example, let's say because I can't tell you that I want you to leave me alone, the easier way for me to do that might be to punch you or kick you or spit on you, okay? Or perhaps I'm not as familiar with how to play with cars like other children would be able to. And so instead of rolling the car on the track and coming up with a story or copying a race theme or something, instead I might just take the car and flip the wheels over and over again. So engaging in a way that's not necessarily, I guess, like I would see a car driving out in the world, so to speak. And so taking all those symptoms into account, though, what we're doing is that, like we said, there's a range or there's a spectrum of what it looks like. And so you have some individuals who aren't able to speak or may not even develop an ability to vocally communicate. And so if I have a learner like that, what we might end up doing is teaching them how to communicate in another way, maybe using pictures or using a voice output device, or maybe even using sign language if they're in an environment where other people might know sign language. And then we have individuals that are able to communicate, like you and I have a conversation completely, but maybe on the social side, they may not as be connected. Maybe they have minimal eye contact. Maybe they may not be looking in my direction, or have the ability to have, let's see, like connection, like eye contact, body posture, and all those things, or maybe even not have a reference or background of what you know or what I know, that their perspective, they may not realize that your perspective and my perspective are not the same. There's really quite a varying degree or a spectrum, as you say, in how the symptoms show up for different individuals. And so, and I think at times too, though, because, and I've heard many people say this, that because they don't actually look physically different, that sometimes that's challenging to understand why their behavior may be the way that it is. And so, again, it's very difficult to just say that person has autism, because there's such a range in the degree of the symptoms that an individual might have. Even from people that they need considerable support, like one-to-one support, because of their safety. They may not be aware of what's going on around them. They may not be able to take care of their day-to-day needs or communicate, all the way to people that live completely independently and maybe just need some support on organization or perspective taking or some of their social skills. So you're getting quite a range of what an individual that has a diagnosis how they function.
Mm-hmm. I think about you and I think about your personality. Do you think that some of your personality traits benefit you in your work, and what traits help?
Okay. Wow. One thing would probably be, like you just said, patience. That I think that with every individual that you encounter, not just the people that I'm working with necessarily, but really even the team members that are working with them. So the therapists, their caregivers, other professionals, I'd say that my patience has to be really, really strong for everyone around our learners and not just our learner. In fact, oftentimes people will say to me, "You must be the most patient person." And I think I'd say that in my professional work, I am, but outside of my professional work, probably not. Like, I don't like standing in lines. I don't like having to wait. When it comes to my work, I mean, I will wait forever. The other thing would be like determination. Like for me, the thing that's so important is being able to see how to connect to another person. Like, what's the way that that individual will learn the best, and teaching them through that direction. And it's going to be different for every single person. And not giving up, really looking at, okay, that didn't work. I'm going to try again. So I guess the other thing would be persistence, and just persistence and the ability to try things and learn from what we've tried. Because if I just sat on my hands and said, "Oh, can't figure this out," wouldn't be able to make a difference for someone. But being able to try, make a mistake, learn from the mistake, and then move forward. So learn from every single experience. That's the other thing too.
From my understanding, you're usually younger when you're diagnosed with autism most of the time. Is that who you're teaching? I know you're teaching clinicians, but are the patients or the clients, are they usually younger people that you're working with?
So the patients or the clients that we treat at the company that I work for, it ranges from like infants all the way up to people. I mean, there's actually not an age limit.
Okay.
Yes. However, lots of different groups have different specializations in terms of what age groups they work with, or maybe what skill sets they work with too. And really though, for me, I think that it's been the company that I work for has been around for such a long time that what we initially did was young children that we treated. And as they got older, we realized some of them didn't necessarily finish a program, but they still needed treatment. So we continued to see them. I think what we do though as behavior analysts is really look at the individual needs of every person and then teach based on whatever skills they need. So whatever it is to fill the gap, that's what we're constantly looking at. So really that's why there's not an age limit with who we work with, because we're looking at each individual and saying, what do we need to provide them to allow them to live their best life? Is that, and whatever that looks like for everyone, because it can be very different from person to person. Could be they're going to a group home. It could be that they'll continue to live with their family. It could be that they go away to college and then get a job and then live on their own, and they get, partner off and have children and all those things too. So really the sky's the limit in terms of what can happen for an individual, because it's really customized for wherever they're at. And so, long answer to your question, but the clinicians that I work with that provide the development of the treatment, age ranges are very different. Some of them are right out of graduate school, so they may be in their early mid-20s, and others might be in a second or third career and in their 40s, 50s, and sometimes even 60s.
This is my second to last question, and it's a little off for someone maybe who isn't looking to join this career, but 1 in every 44 people, that's a lot. So what is something that maybe you would recommend for us to work on, how we can be maybe more accommodating to someone who has autism? And again, it is a spectrum, and so it will change for different people, but what's something overall that we can maybe do to just be more loving and more kind and accommodating?
That's actually perfect what you just said, though, which is, I think, just being, rather than being reactive, being curious. So if you happen to see someone like let's say you see a parent and a child at a grocery store, and the child seems to be having a difficult time, or the parent is, rather than saying, "What's wrong with you know," like even the tone or like how you perceive what's happening, rather than wonder what's wrong with that parent or what's wrong with that child, instead being, I want, like, being more curious about it. I wonder what's happening. I wonder if there's something that they need. Is there anything that I can do? And even asking, are you okay? Is there anything that you need? Or even sometimes to walk in, of course, with permission, asking the caregiver, just saying hi or something, is everything okay, instead of walking by and pretending like you don't see it or whatever. I think that it's really important for people to practice kindness and curiosity.
But my last question would be, what would your advice be for someone who might be interested in helping people with not just with autism, but anyone who maybe has a disability or mental illness or anything? What would be your advice?
I would say try it out. I think that there are a lot of things that people are afraid to do without knowing all the information. And I have to say that even for what I'm doing now, I did not know what I was getting into, honestly and truly. But I did know that trying it out, I was able to determine that it was something that has literally been one of the biggest parts of my adult life. And if I just waited to figure out when the time was perfect or when I had all the answers, I likely would have missed out on an opportunity. So I encourage people to try it out. And it doesn't mean that you have to make it your career necessarily either. Maybe you can volunteer or just put in a couple of hours, or just make a difference with someone just by taking a chance and trying it out.
Why not?
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Sue.
Thank you, Hannah.